Let's jump to this story. From the Post-Millennial, FBI Director Kash Patel says Bureau is on the verge of unmasking the funding and command structure behind the Antifa terror group. Patel said there are indications that support for anti-American radical groups is coming from America's enemies overseas, that the Bureau is following the money. We have this President Trump's roundtable, I guess they say. Patel said, furthermore, Patel indicated the funding is also coming from U.S. nonprofits with IRS tax-exempt status. Look, the thing I can tell you is that the money doesn't lie. And the thing we're doing at the FBI is following the money. And thanks to President Trump, we now have Antifa designated, rightfully so, as a domestic terror organization. And we have had multiple investigations going on. The one thing I want to stress, we're looking at a decentralized network of various organizations. We are looking at cells that use the actual brand Antifa as a proper noun. But I would say Antifa largely describes the semi-centralized, and it's not totally decentralized, network of leftists that train, recruit, finance, or otherwise all of the leftist movements we see in this country. Now, Nate, you've uncovered a lot of these people.
Yeah.
What's going on? Who are these people?
Yeah, I want to point out one thing first, which is that the reason why this is so difficult to trace, and bravo to this administration for doing it. For real, this is such a big deal. Is that these groups are not even nonprofits a lot of the time. They're under an umbrella of several other nonprofits, right? So you take someone at the top like a Soros who gives money to Tides, who then gives money to Progress Unity Fund, who then gives money to Answer Coalition. And it's done. I mean, if you're proud of what you're giving your money to, you're not hiding it, you don't go through all that trouble, right? So you have to follow it all the way through several different nonprofits. It's a big thing.
And the individuals often will work for multiple nonprofits, not just one. You'll find, some friends of mine and I were looking at various nonprofits that bring in funding through. I mean, we used to do fundraising for nonprofits, and we'd find that 3 board members were 3 executive level staff members. There were like 12 people, and they'd each be on the board of a different company and executive staff of a different company to fulfill their legal requirements. So they could have a bunch of different nonprofits, and they could shuffle money between each other, making it very difficult to track.
Correct. And so someone who I exposed, so David Chung, who the leader of the People's Forum protests that they organize like twice a week. Okay, so he's on the IRS tax forms for the People's Forum, getting paid $75,000 a year to protest. I confronted him. He said, no comment, no comment, no comment. This guy's taking pictures with Tlaib. Like, this guy has connections to Congress, right? He's also on the board of Rise and Resist, another protest group. He's also with the Singham Justice Fund. So it's just like Tim is saying, yes, it's very true. These people are protesting for multiple orgs.
When I was at Occupy Wall Street, this is a story that I mentioned before, and as highlighting your work, Nate, uncovering, you walk up to these people and you're like, here's a paid protester, and then you like show a picture and explain how they're getting paid. So we were talking about this. I told this story when I was at Occupy Wall Street. Fox News is saying, oh, they're all paid protesters, things like this. And the belief among normies that were showing up as tourists to Occupy, not actively being there, was that Fox was lying. None of these people were being paid. That's ridiculous. They were collecting donations. The truth was there were a handful of trust fund kids who were there because they were bored, but nonprofit organizations in New York had staffers there during work hours because they got the day off. So there were a handful of people that I met from various charities, nonprofits, and also political organizations that were progressive and leftist. And I'm talking to them, and they say, "Oh yeah, I work for insert organization." I'd be like, "Oh wow, are they paying you to be here?" No. And I'm like, "Oh, are you off?" Well, they gave me today off to come down. This is what happens. You work for a nonprofit whose mission is communism, socialism, or otherwise. What does that mean? It means you're handing out postcards. It means you're fundraising. It means you're organizing at universities. Occupy Wall Street happens, and they say, why don't you take the day off and go hang out at Occupy? Right. What happens? They go to Occupy. They facilitate, organize, exacerbate, recruit, finance, etc., and they are paid a salary, but today is their day off. Mm-hmm. That's the game they're playing a lot of times.
Yeah, well, like you go to their websites, like a lot of these like freedom funds and that sort of thing, and it's like George Costanza's Human Fund, like it's like ChatGPT nonsense, and it's just like vague descriptions like we're seeking justice and reconciliation, and it's like, like, what is going on here? How do they employ 50, 60 people? Like,
I think
makes no sense.
it's important to expose the idea of somebody being paid to do that at all, because I think the average normie who doesn't follow politics closely, maybe only pays a little bit of attention when election season comes around or this stuff is going on right now. The idea that somebody would be paid to go out and do something like that would be completely foreign to them. When they see these people in a large group, they're imagining hundreds of people who all independently of their own volition came to the idea that I need to go out and stand up against tyranny or whatever they're talking about, no kings. And the idea that people would be paid money to do it is just shocking to a lot of
Right.
people.
I mean, the point that Tim brought up about how they take the day off. So case in point was the Trump Tower occupation, one of them, right? So you get in the middle of the day on a Tuesday, 30 people. So I interview this woman, and it turns out she works for a nonprofit, Jewish Currents. It's a super far left magazine, and she's just there in the middle of the workday. She on her LinkedIn, everything says that she works there. So again, she's given the day off to go and occupy the king's home. You know, you come to think that these people, I asked them, do you think Trump is a dictator? And they don't have an answer for me anymore, because they know if Trump was a dictator, that would be the last building they would walk into. I mean,
They'd be allowed into.
You just invaded his family's home, you know, and they're escorted out so nicely, you know what I mean? They're carried out. It's a joke.
So this is another thing. Man, I actually knew a lot of these guys at Occupy who I assume are like feds, or Fed isn't the right word. You know, this is the mistake people made, because this is like an international coalition of well-funded. They are individuals. They're activists. They're revolutionaries. They are at the higher level. It's almost like they're intelligence guys, but they're not working for any. It's like a rogue nation almost. Mm-hmm. They work with Soros. They know Soros's family, but the problem is the way they shuffle this money around. I think looking at Soros singularly is not necessarily a mistake, but it misses the bigger picture. A lot of this money, I believe, excuse me, coming from USAID, shuffled around. A lot of it was coming from what we saw with Lee Zeldin uncovering these green slush funds, where the Biden administration pulls out like $7 billion or some insane number into a nonprofit that existed for a month. That was insane. And Trump comes
You're talking
in.
about the Stacey Abrams thing? That was like the $2 billion slush fund. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, the one that, whatever it was, Lee Zeldin uncovered a couple working in environmental issues for the federal government under Trump. And he said the Biden admin was dumping money into these charities that just started. Then what happens? Let me tell you guys a secret. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but did you know that every nonprofit is two nonprofits? No. 501c3 and 501c4. Are you familiar with those terms?
Yes.
So the way it works is a 501c3 is a tax-exempt charitable organization. Their financing has to be filed publicly through what's called the 990 or 990N. You can look those up for every charity. However, most organizations will simultaneously launch what's called a 501c4, or comparably known as a PAC. It's not always PACs. These are not tax-exempt donations, but they don't need to be publicly disclosed. So here's what happens. You will see someone fundraising for famous progressive charitable cause, and they'll be talking to you at an event, at your door, on the street, on the phone, whatever it may be. And they'll say, guys, I'll use a modern example. Donald Trump is trying to be a dictator. We have only a few years to stop him. Here's the problem. Our organization only brought in, guess how much? $2 million last year. Can you believe it? Everybody knows Trump's a dictator, and we could only get $2 million. Now, you're probably saying, Tim, that's a lot of money. But I assure you, with our staff of 100 people working around the clock to stop Trump, you break that down, we are working at poverty wages to stop the fascist takeover. That's why we need you right now. I need $50 a month. Can you commit? It's just $50 a month. Cut out one Starbucks coffee a day, and you're making this possible. What do you say? Handshake. You know what they don't tell you? The actual charity will bring money in and send it to the 501c4, or when you then fill out that form, wherever you may be, you're donating to a 501c4 that doesn't need to disclose the total amount of donations they bring in. So they're technically telling you the truth. You'll donate to Brett Dasovic, the Fund Incorporated. It'll say on the form, your donation goes to the Brett Dasovic Fund, who brought in $700 million last year.
Let's go.
The Brett Dasovic Fund then donates $2 million to the Brett Dasovic Environmental Causes nonprofit.
Perfect.
That way I can then go and say, Brett Dasovic's environmental nonprofit only brought in $2 million last year. Will you give us money? What they don't disclose, because they don't have to, because they're technically telling the truth. All that money is being shuffled to a 501c4 that won't disclose where the money goes, and then they give a tiny little bit. You'll see it. It's amazing. There will be like the executive director of a well-known, famous progressive nonprofit. Watch for this. They'll say, I only make $80,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And I know for a lot of people in this country, that's high. And that's sad, isn't it? I am a CEO level, an executive at a large organization, and I don't get the millions of dollars these guys do at this job. What they don't tell you is they also have another job as the executive director of Fund Incorporated, where they get paid $7 million a year.
I mean, a lot of those a lot of those CEOs end up making that amount too. They just get the rest in stock options.
It's all one big shell game. What I described it as back in the day is selling hopes and dreams to people.
So then the question is like the way he's selling it here is that they're going to nail down the funding. And I think the idea there is that people have an idea of like, there's a person at the end of that tunnel. There's a George Soros at the end of that tunnel. And I think what people have a hard time with, maybe it's just because of the way people have been raised right now, because they've watched more movies and television rather than read about notes on how nonprofits work, is they're imagining that there's an end of the tunnel where there's a document that leads to a specific person who's been funding all this, and they're not going to be comfortable with the idea that it's not that simple.
Yeah, it's probably going to end up being a couple thousand individuals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be Democrat politicians. It's as simple as USAID or these slush funds. They create a fund. They then say, we're going to give, I mean, it's fascinating because some of these organizations that initially get the funds could be innocuous. It could be like the repairing TVs in low-income neighborhoods nonprofit that gets $30 million or whatever. And it's like, we want to ensure that there's digital infrastructure for people in rural areas. And then you take a look at their books. They make charitable contributions to various foundations. And after 3 or 4 different degrees of separation, you find it all goes towards an organization that's on the ground protesting.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so useful that the FBI is actually doing this. Because, yeah, for a lot of people, there's a lot of names to keep up with, a lot of organizations. Everything's constantly unraveling. New ones. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Yeah. It's going to be nice to get a few names out there that can allow you to kind of put the pieces together to fill in some gaps. Because, yeah, right now it's just very frustrating. I mean, that's the intention, obviously, but it's very frustrating because from the outsider perspective, I mean, it's really tough to stay on top of everything.
I want to ask you, Nate, because aside from going on the ground and doing field reporting, you've confronted paid protesters. Mm-hmm. Have you faced threats to your safety from challenging them in person?
No, in person, all I've had is a water bottle thrown at me. So I'm lucky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my DMs aren't as nice, but yeah.
But what do you find when you confront these people? Like, how does it go down? Do they panic?
Yeah, they panic. I mean, the No Kings one was hilarious. I walked up to the 4 vests, the Amazon vests that they wear.
Yeah.
And I walk up and, I'm just like asking them, what's the plan for the protest? Like, oh, our job is to do this. Or we're marshaling here. And I'm like, are you working with the NYPD? Like, what do you mean that you're like running traffic? You're like, what are you talking about? Right. And she's like, oh, we didn't have a briefing with them. I'm like, do they know about you? And she's like, yeah, they're not blind. And I'm like, okay, well, that's odd. Right. So what happens is I show the credentials and then the woman goes, I think this is one of the right-wing troll guys. And then they go like, oh, and they don't know how to handle it. And they just talk over each other.
Have you ever called out one of their names to them without them knowing who you were? Like, you're John Smith.
Well, with David, I was like, hey, David, how you doing? He was like, hey, Nate, how you doing?
Oh, he knew who you were.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you think these people are starting to track you because they know you're putting out videos that are getting hundreds of thousands or millions of views?
I mean, like when I go to a protest, almost instantly, I do have people following me, asking, telling the protesters not to speak with me, but it has a reverse effect because a lot of the protesters are like, what's the problem with this kid?
Yeah.
Like what did he, like, I'm just, so then they speak with me and it looks so bad on their part because it's like this person has agreed to do an interview with me, just someone who's like, he's brainwashed, but he's not paid. He's just there to protest. Right. He's like, look, I want to talk. I want to speak into a microphone. I'm at a protest. And they're like, no, don't speak to him. So
yeah.
Well, it's like I've been on the ground with a lot, like in New York, and a lot of people will spot him. And of course they think he's, every name in the book. But the way that they retaliate is just like the cattiest, like low test reactions. They're, no, don't talk to him. Don't talk to him. Like but it's like in a weird, like there's a level of cordialness and a level of familiarity. And it's like just so like soy.
Remember when you got
so
attacked
Reddit.
at a bar?
Yeah, I did. Well, for being a fascist Zionist, I got kicked out of a bar.
Yeah.
A Jewish Nazi.
A couple of people have tried to attack me through like my years on the street there, like a couple of fistfights. Nothing too crazy though. I think I'm on the luckier side of all of that. It's not too crazy out in New York City though. It's definitely it hasn't reached like the levels of Portland or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
not. No, I think the NYPD does a very good job, honestly. Yeah. They do.
I also think it is worth mentioning, while there are some paid protesters, I don't believe most are paid.
Correct.
Like most people
No,
are there on their own volition
95%.
and they're excited to be there. A lot of the anti-Israel protesters out there, all these Arabs and Muslims out there, I don't think they're getting paid to be there. I think they're fighting for their motherland. Then there are these other group of people who are being paid though, and these are these pieces of shit legal observers who say they're only there to make sure police are doing their job, but they're really there to just assist the far left protesters in whatever protest they're trying to proceed in. Then this other group of people who might be the worst out of any of these are the sympathetic photographers, the protesters and everything but name photographers looking to like aggrandize these people and like take sexy pictures of them for their Instagram pages, and then they could all post their pictures and try to make it look like they're doing something relevant on the street, so they could try to be put in some newspaper article and like front page of the New York Times. And it's a collection of them, and they'll all work together, and then they'll be like fed stories from the protesters, so they'll work hand in fist with them. They're making money, the legal observers are making money, but I just kind of wanted to break down what's going on the streets over there. The legal observers, I think I have the biggest beef with because they are so nakedly and openly partisan. They won't go to any right-wing rallies and try to protect right-wingers and just say, oh, we're just observing what's going on and trying to protect their First Amendment rights. It's only at far left events where they feel like it is necessary for them to show up and micromanage the police's every move.
Yeah, and it's so the way they behave is so catty.
They're
It's
just bitching and
degrading.
moaning. They're just
it's so
bitching
annoying.
and moaning.
This is what I think should have people concerned. Occupy Wall Street, for instance. Who's going to be in a camp at Occupy Wall Street? Do you think it's going to be any legitimate journalist who's like, I want to get to the bottom of what's going on? Nate, why aren't you camping with these far leftists and following around? And it's because it's only a certain kind of person that would literally do that. When I went to Occupy, it was largely just an interesting thing for me to see. I also have no problem with sleeping in the streets. So when Occupy started, I was like, sure, whatever. What I end up finding is that were I not there, the narrative, the history of that space will always have been a lie. Because the leftists control the narrative. There were a handful of rapes in the park. Well, of course they were. What do you think happens when you have a bunch of people just sleeping in the street? They're in a park by themselves in dense camps where there's clusters of people banging drums all night. No one can hear anything. Loud traffic. Several rapes happened. You know what the response was from the Occupy facilitators? Don't tell anyone because it'll make us look bad. Yep. There was a division between the east and the west sides of Zuccotti Park during Occupy. The east side of the park was controlled by trust fund kids who were trying to manipulate and control things. But the people who actually comprised the occupying body, they formed what's called the General Union on the west side of the camp. No joke. The east side of the camp there weren't really that many tents. It wasn't as dense. And that's where they had the General Assembly. Trust fund kids, facilitators, and paid protesters were organizing. They had what's called the progressive stack, meaning if you were a white man, you didn't get to speak. No joke. You were the speech order for everybody who raised their hand was based on how oppressed you were. Not a joke. So if you were a paraplegic, a lesbian of color with a developmental disability, you would speak first. If you were a white man, they would look at you and go, anyone besides a white man want to speak? Okay, well then moving on. The other side of the park tried holding their own rally because they were concerned that they were the actual Occupy being shut out. And facilitators came and threatened violence against them. That's how insane Occupy Wall Street was. What was actually going on in that park was disarray, disorganization, and chaos. I guarantee you, if you find one of these occupiers who wrote a book about it, it's going to be a romanticized fantasy utopia of what happened. They use narratives like that to try and convince people communism will work. Yeah. Then you actually go and experience what it was. Let me tell you, I walked into the park one day and they had the food section. They were giving out food to people who were hungry. Tourists who were walking through the park to check out Occupy were taking some of this food. Guess where the food came from?
Dumpster?
Dumpster. That is correct. Leftists went dumpster diving, grabbed a bunch of expired trashed food, brought it in crates to Occupy, started handing it out to people. And I walked up and I saw one of the labels on it. And then I was like, where did you guys get all this food? And they were like, dumpster diving. And I said, What do you think the press is going to say when they find out you're handing dumpster food to tourists and they like got shocked and then shoveled it all into the garbage and tried getting rid of it?
They're homeless maxing. It's the new method, I hear. But
I
That's what
remember
the left does.
during the George Floyd riots, there was this one van that would show up to all of the events to like hand out snacks and goodies and make sure everybody at the protests and was like hydrated and everything. Just
Yeah.
strange things that people decide to commit. And I don't think like even those people were paid.
Who makes
I
the
think
shields? Who makes the
It's a good
shields?
question. Who makes the shields?
Yep.
I mean, you brought up the legal thing. It's something that I
The
really,
legal observers?
yeah, but also like something I really want people to know about is that how often there are arrests at these protests. Arrests in New York City are expensive, right? Like a lot of time these police are on overtime, and so who pays to bail these people out? Okay, look into, or you can watch one of my videos on it, but you can, if you go to scroll down to the bottom of Palestine Legal, you will see at the bottom Tide Center. So George Soros gives money to the Tide Center, and this organization is just made to bail protesters out. Anti-West protesters is made for that. So it's expensive to have thousands of arrests at these protests. It's taxpayer money.
Nate, I will say nowadays it's cashless bail, so a lot of these guys get out without anything. If anything, it's just costing the city the overtime hours that the NYPD has to constantly put in for all these guys.
yeah, and then they got to pay for the Met tickets once they release them. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.